All right, so we are here taking a look at the boiler room, and I am joined by Maya. And you were in charge of art and animation on the team, I see. And yeah, can you talk a little bit about your background in game development?
Yeah, sure. So I started getting into game dev from the art side back during the pandemic, actually, around like 2020, 2021-ish. I was doing comics at the time, and I started getting into pixel art, and I did Ludum Dare as my first game jam. And actually, what happened then was that I was the artist, and I joined someone I had never met before, just someone off of Discord to be the programmer. And he bailed partway through, and he didn't finish his part of it. And I remember just being devastated. I worked so hard on the art. I was just completely crushed. And so I started learning game dev as well because I told myself I was never going to put myself again in that position to rely on someone and not be able to submit. Um, and so I've mostly, my history is mostly in game jams. I don't work in like professional game development or anything. And I was doing solo jams for a while, but I met members of my team along the way, and they've been amazing. And thanks to them, we've been able to build much bigger games with a lot more polish and a lot more features. And so it's been, I'm glad that I've gotten here today where I can be again just the artist
Mhm.
and not feel like I have to do everything because we had a pretty big team actually for this. And working together on that was a great experience.
Okay, so I think I'm figuring out how things are supposed to work here. We've got a sort of like recipe for the bath that's coming in along the top of these cards, and these sort of purple units represent the amount of heat that I've generated with the boiler, and then we're able to upgrade the boiler through a currency that I'm not seeing how that works.
So I'm glad you were able to kind of immediately spot that connection with the boiler gauge and those cards because we did get feedback that it's a little confusing. The boiler gauge is vertical, but those bars on the card are horizontal.
Hmm.
And so a lot of people kind of weren't catching that connection at first. To upgrade your boiler, so you do have gold there in that bottom UI, and if you click on
Oops.
the boiler, then it'll give you options for
Oh, okay,
what you
I
could
see, I
do.
see. Yeah, so the gold is just written here as text, and then if I click on it, I see, I see. So that's where I'm able to. I spend. Um, okay, so only one of these
Yeah.
is highlighting. Okay, so that got me. I see. So I should have way more of these little soots on the actual coal, and that's increasing my overall capacity. I see. Okay, so Spirited Away is the obvious reference here.
Yeah.
Um, and in terms of the mechanics, did that all sort of come from the movie itself, or did that come from someplace else?
Well, so actually, the brainstorming process for this game was really, really tough for us. We spent over 5 hours brainstorming, and at that point, we thought we were kind of doomed, right? We were like, this, we just wasted way too much time, and we still weren't sold on an idea. We kind of defaulted to something, which is that one of the members of my game jam, our kind of game systems programmer, he really wanted to do something that was maybe some kind of like idle clicker genre.
Hmm.
And he was saying we could control a bunch of little guys, right? Because the theme with the built to scale, we really struggled with that as like being, in 2D and in pixel art, right? We're like, how do we handle scale with this? And so he wanted us to do some kind of idle clicker kind of thing where you'd have a lot of tiny creatures that you're controlling. And I had not really played any idle clickers before, and I didn't really get it as a genre. I didn't feel passionate about the idea of the
Hmm.
game. And so I said, you know what, at least, how will I make this interesting for myself? I said, if we're controlling tiny guys, let's do the soot sprites from Spirited Away. I said, at least, I'll have fun doing the art, even if I don't think that we have, a fun game concept lined up. That'll kind of give me the motivation to work on it. And so that the first like day or two, honestly, were pretty rough. Like morale was really low because we weren't sure if the game was going to be fun, and we didn't think we had like something novel. And so it was actually really surprising when we started having something we could test, and we were playing it, and I'm saying, oh, you know what? Actually, I do like this. And we were able to start digging into leaning into the stuff that was working, which is, we thought picking up the little soot sprites, which, by the way, you can hold your left mouse button down to like
Yeah.
go and just like grab a whole bunch of them at once. Um, and we thought like this is the part of this game that seems fun, is just going around and picking up all these little guys and then watching them walk around. And we really leaned into that. I don't know if you can really tell here, but we tried to lean into the scale thing by, depending on where you drop the sprites,
Hmm.
the soot sprites, they like grow or shrink, right? Like the closest ones are bigger and the farthest ones are really small. And we really tried to, you were saying like, were the mechanics inspired by Spirited Away? We tried to stick thematically to it, right? So they carry coal, and there's these like herb things that you use for the baths, and
Hmm.
you're filling the tokens. So we thematically tried to stick to that. But in terms of what became a mechanic and what didn't, like why did we decide that they're going to harvest these grasses and fill jars with them? It was just to give you more stuff to control them to do, because that was the most fun thing about the game.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the sort of core loop of like having the sprites handling sort of resource gathering from different parts of the screen. Um, I guess this is where I also admit that I'm not really big on idle games. So I, tell me if this is maybe a thought that also went through your head, but um, I would have loved to see maybe more of a motivation to reallocate your resources, like where you're gathering from. I'm always like more mechanics, more player control.
Yes, so I totally get what you're saying and agree. And actually, we did kind of at the end, as we're wrapping things together, I think this wouldn't necessarily count as idle clicker anymore, because I want to say idle clicker, the genre, the idea is you can leave it
Yeah.
going, right? Like there's no threat, like if you just let it be. But actually, if you manage to get a lot of soot sprites, so with your gold, you can buy more houses and you can
Hmm.
get more soot sprites. If you end up with a lot of soot sprites and you have them collecting coal a lot, when your boiler meter is full, like you already have all the water, but they're still throwing more and more coal in there,
Hmm.
that pressure gauge under the water starts to
Ah.
rise, and the whole thing can actually explode. So you do have to kind of, if you just leave them, throwing coal in there, that can blow up in your face. Um, and yeah, while we were designing, I kind of wanted us to have those grasses in the background, the green, yellow, and
Mhm.
red. I kind of wanted to have them growing, so that when they harvest them, it goes down, and then over time it grows, so that you would keep having to like reallocate them to it. We didn't end up having time for that, and also I think a lot of the team didn't agree with me that that was a good direction to go. Um, but yeah, we did. I did try to get some stuff in there that was going to move us away from this fully idle um, kind of concept. The things I really wish we would have had time to get in there, when you finish the game, it
Mhm.
had that thing that was saying like you have this many days left in your contract.
Yeah.
It would have been so small. I wish we had put that into a scriptable object and like decremented it every time
Oh my
so that
gosh.
as you play you can see that there are like actually fewer days, just like as a little flavor thing. Um, yeah. And yeah, I was pretty happy with balance towards the end. If you are trying to like maximize how
Mhm.
many orders you fill and the amount of time you have, things can get like pretty hectic. And
Yeah, I
one of
can
the things
imagine.
actually, yeah, one of the things I thought was really interesting
Mhm.
in the experience building this, because so I've done a bunch of game jams before, and my biggest complaint about my own jam games is that people don't really play them for very long. Like, they'll play them and give me good feedback and say, "Oh, it's so cute, it's so fun," but nobody really wants to like hit play again or spend more than, 3 minutes in the experience. Um, and this game, we had some comments of people saying they played a bunch, and I was kind of surprised. I was like, "Really? Like, you really played for an hour?" And then I saw my little cousin, 8 years old, playing this game, and
Mhm.
she was super into it. But the thing that was interesting to me is that she wasn't actually playing the game correctly. Right? So super into it, not actually buying anything, not spending the money, not upgrading stuff, not caring about filling the orders. Like, she'd get the soot sprites filling the jars all the way full, and she wouldn't even fill a bath order. She'd want the jars to empty so she can fill them again. It was
Yeah.
just really interesting to see that the only thing she liked about the game was essentially what we would call like juice, right? Like, or polish, right? Like, just watching little guys run around do the thing. She just liked that. She's not actually like playing the game.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I think that like that's sort of inherent to the appeal of idle games is that feeling of just like enjoying a sort of juicy experience. Um, and I think that in the in the way that you can sort of find the fun in a game, um, I see there being a possibility to kind of double down on what you have here in terms of the way the mechanics are working and adding that idea of like the grass growing and needing to reallocate guys, maybe even needing to like tell them to go to sleep if they get tired, or other sort of more active mechanics like that. On the other hand, you could also just lean into the idea of just making it a more traditional idle experience and having that like more traditional hands-off style approach. Although I would not really know how to make good recommendations for that.
Yeah, yeah, we had such a long argument, my team, because the game systems engineer, right, he likes these idle games. And I was arguing a lot because to me, the most important category, right, in GMTK it'd be
Hmm.
enjoyment, in LD it'd be fun, right? Like,
Yeah.
to me, that category means more than anything else. And I was arguing with him that idle clickers are not fun. And he was saying they are fun because it's fun to see big numbers and watch them get bigger. And I wore him down. I don't know if he even agreed with me or if he was just tired of arguing, but I was like, you can say that watching numbers get big is satisfying,
Hmm.
but you cannot call it fun. um, but yeah, I enjoyed the game a lot more than I thought I did. So that was cool.
I'm really glad that you got it to a point that you were both, let's call it, content with the direction that it was going in. Um, but I do think it's a really interesting difference in psychology in terms of what people look for when they play a game. Some people really just want to like turn off their brain, um, and just have a really like something to click through and feel good about. One experience I've shared a few times that I really stuck with me. One time I was just riding the subway and I saw a lady with like a Palm Pilot or just like a really simple like maybe BlackBerry type device, playing solitaire, and the solitaire game had a like auto move button that you could click, and all she was doing was tapping the little button at the top of the screen to make the cards flip, and then tapping auto move and seeing if it would do anything. And that's how she played the game. She just kept tapping auto move until nothing was left, then tapped the deck, then tapped auto move, and like that was it. So like as far as what she wanted, she just wanted a time waster and something to idly tap on while riding the subway. And that is antithetical to how I approach playing games. I want games that are engaging. I want games that test my reflexes, that test the sort of like logic and reasoning. Like I love strategy games. So I can't put myself in a headspace to actually like necessarily design a game that would appeal to that kind of audience that is looking for that kind of experience. But I understand that there is a distinct want there for something that is a more uh, for lack of a better word, just a more idle experience.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I fall probably somewhere right in the middle of this spectrum because I like games that pretend like I'm being really strategic and really
Mhm.
smart about my choices. They give me a lot of options, right? But they're not like super, super hard. I'm not, yeah, I can't handle games like, Elden Ring and all these kind of like devastatingly difficult games. But yeah,
Yeah,
I definitely like to have more to do
yeah, yeah,
as I'm playing.
and that's like it's interesting to me because it's actually great that Alice is here in chat, Lever Drive, because when I tried one of the games that Alice is working on, Riddle of Steel, it is a very like Souls-like combat experience, but Alice added a difficulty slider to the game to change the sort of speed of the character controls, so you could kind of tune things if you find the experience too difficult, whether it's the like reaction speed or the movement speed. You can individually adjust those sliders, which I found made the game like much more accessible. And I would love for a game like Elden Ring to have features like that that goes in both directions, right? Like I would love to see a version of that that can tune it down so that I can have an easier time with it. But I would also, for those people who want it to be even more difficult, fine, crank the slider in the other direction and make it even more hard on yourself. Although I guess that's what mechanics like New Game Plus are supposed to be.
That's a really interesting take on difficulty, as opposed to just saying, oh, here's easy mode, normal mode, hard mode, right? To give you a little bit more control over, like, what are you finding difficult? You can tweak this. Yeah,
Mhm.
it's a cool take.
Yeah, so I guess in terms of in terms of this game, like I guess from the art perspective, what do you think was the most difficult problem that you encountered, and what was your solution to that?
Oh man, almost always the hardest thing for me is color palettes.
Hmm.
And I still really am like, I'm not necessarily happy with where I landed. I really tried, I thought that I would have an easier time here because it's fan art. So I thought I've already essentially got a color palette, right? I don't need to design characters. I can just take from what already exists. And I really tried to focus the palette on these kind of oranges, reds, right? These dark purpley red kind of colors.
Hmm.
But I still don't feel that I nailed the look of the game, like or the movie, right? I don't feel like you play it and you look at the palette and you say, "Oh, I've been, brought into the world of Spirited Away." I think the characters tell you that, but I don't think the color palette tells you that.
I guess the like it's difficult because if I think of Ghibli films, they have a very distinct look to them. Like they are very vibrant, very colorful, um, and I think that this captures like clearly the personality of it. Certainly, I think like the way the sprites animate looks very much in line with the way that the sprites had this very, I don't know, like jovial, like bouncy nature to them. The way they like hop as they move around. Um, we've got a very good like Kamaji in the background there. Um, but yeah, I guess the palette is tricky to nail that down.
Yeah, I think palette is something that every game jam, every time I overthink it and I spend so much time obsessing over it, and then I panic later that there's not enough time for animations and stuff because I'm still going back and rethinking the color palette. There have definitely been times that I've defaulted then to saying, well, I'm just gonna take a palette off low spec, something
Mm.
nice that already exists. Um, yeah. Also, I mean, so while I've been acting as the artist for a lot of my game jams, you asked me how I got into jams, and I
Yeah.
was saying how I got into that programming side. I ended up changing careers as a result. So I used to be a teacher, and I'm now a programmer. I don't work on games, but I do write code. And I've been trying to find ways to do less art and be
Mm.
able to write more code. I prefer writing code to drawing actually. It's so much faster. Um, I feel like making art, the thing that really gets me about it is, every time that I make a piece of art for a game, it's really only good for that game. I can't ever reuse it because the resolution's not going to be right, the color palette's not going to be right, the frames and the animation, something they're not going to match other stuff. And so to me, feels like now that I'm used to being a programmer, this feels like such a shame to
Mm.
spend my time working on something that's only usable once, like I'm never going to be able to use it again, as opposed to one of the big things my game jam team is focused on right now is creating a reusable toolbox, stuff that we can throw into any jam and save ourselves time. So our game systems engineer, Casti, he, for example, he's always doing game dev, outside of jams and building all kinds of tools. So one thing he built was a explosion effect for one of
Hmm.
his games. And when the boiler explodes here, he just threw that in, said, let's just reuse the same explosion effect that I have, right? This kind of stuff saves us a lot of time. In a previous one of our jams, too, he had this um, tool for creating essentially like vines, like for if you want a line that's got nodes along it and it's going to be able to wiggle and react to things and bounce around, that he was using for vines in an environment where the explosions would cause the vines to like wave around.
Hmm.
Um, and he was able to throw that into our game and for us to use it as part of the character to create. We had a vacuum that the character was going around sucking up objects into this vacuum, and the hose for the vacuum, we used that same tool that he built. So that it took like 5 minutes, like for him to get it into the game, and so many people commented later saying, "Oh, I love the hose. I love how wiggly it is when you run around." Right? So that's really our focus: is how do we create this toolbox of ready to go stuff
Hmm.
that's going to increase the polish of our games without making their scope unreasonable.
Yeah, it's interesting because I guess when you make a lot of very distinct looking games, then I can completely understand how you can't reuse assets between different projects. But on the other hand, like I'll finish this game and then I'll tab away and it just real quick to show off some of the game jam projects that I've worked on because since a lot of them are built from a very similar art style, aka my art style, what I'm capable of as a developer. A lot of the resolution is all the same. Everything is the same, like 640 by 360 aspect ratio. I am able to reuse a fair bit of artwork between different projects, and that's definitely helped, as well as like a menu system. And I think like striving to build that out is really important and is ultimately going to be like what allows you to sort of tackle larger scoped projects for future game jams. But yeah, I guess in terms of like your development career, like are you hoping to um, work on something like a little more long term, like a game that might eventually come to Steam?
Yeah, we have all kinds of aspirations, and we've yet to have anything that we can really show off and say, "Hey, this is in production and it's gonna come out," right? But so we had a game that we did for Ludum Dare that was called um, Demon Chalk, where you could draw circles around enemies in order to damage them and capture their souls and
Hmm.
summon all kinds of beasts. Yeah, that one, Demon Chalk. And this one, we really liked the mechanic that we created. And so we thought to take this and turn it into, a full game that maybe we would put on Steam. Didn't get too far with that project, just too many people's, schedules not lining up. Also,
Mm-hmm.
that one, Jailbound Joyride Revamped, is a recreation of the one beneath it, Jailbound Joyride, that was also a Ludum Dare entry. We hoped to put this one out on mobile
Hmm.
for free, but we got most of the way there, and then didn't have enough like levels and things, and no one wanted to commit the time to it. I'd say that's one of my team's biggest struggles in the past has been that we love creating
Hmm.
assets. Nobody wants to put them together though. Like, like we'll create game systems and we'll
Hmm.
create art and we'll create all these pieces of a game,
Hmm.
but the bit when it comes to level design and
Yeah.
balance and putting all that together and creating a lot of content, that's where we lose motivation.
Mm. Yeah, I mean it's difficult to sort of convert because it's nobody's full-time job, right? Or rather everyone else has a full-time job. No?
Sorry, you cut out for a moment.
Oh, oh,
But
yeah, I was
yeah,
just
you were
saying,
asking if we have full-time jobs on the side of this?
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So each one of us, so actually our game systems engineer is the closest to actually being able to produce a game full time because he has been able to focus on that
Hmm.
full time for a bit, but I'm not sure if he's going to be able to make that, stick with that or if he'll have to go back to development. But yeah, the rest of us are full-time devs. Some are devs and parents to small children.
Hmm.
But that's why we were so lucky to have this big group because none of us had tons of time to contribute.
Yeah.
Um, so we were really able to specialize in different pieces. So one of our devs worked just on the boiler. Like he
Yeah,
wrote
I
the
saw
code
that.
for the boiler and all the VFX for it. Yeah, exactly. We had one dev who's actually my husband was doing the UI. So he was focused just on the UI of the cards and that bottom bar UI and stuff like that. Casti, our game systems engineer, he's the one who he can get the most done in the shortest amount of time
Nice.
and yeah, so he's responsible for the bulk, I'd say,
Hmm.
of the code.
So I just wanted to do a quick tangent over here to some of the games that I've made for jams. Um, I guess partially because at one point I made this what I call pocket RPG tile set. Um, I have been able to sort of take this artwork and use it to make this game jam, this particular Ludum Dare entry. But I also even used the like dungeon tile set to make this like Zelda 2 style game. It's not the way that that art should be used for to make a side-scrolling game when it's supposed to be top down. Um, but the enemy design, um, because of the perspective, there are a lot of enemies that I've like made in earlier games. Like it's all part of that same pocket RPG tile set. Like there are actual enemies in this game, and then I was able to take those enemies and use them in a side-scrolling perspective because in this kind of like flat on um, perspective that you have in this artwork, when an enemy looks like this, it doesn't. It's not too much of a stretch to imagine it in a side-on perspective as well. So I guess because my art is more simplistic, I've been able to get more reuse out of it.
So were you planning when you originally created the assets, was it
Mhm.
your plan to make them such that you would be able to reuse them in different projects, or did you just happen to later say, you know, actually I could take this and put this here? And it like does that require an extra level of planning on your part?
I guess like I designed this artwork actually to be used in like projects in general. That's why I put it on itch.io as an asset pack. And the asset pack itself is a playable game that you can go through. So I already it gave me an idea of how the assets would be used. And if I can, I don't want to throw shade on other asset packs, but I find that a lot of the time when I look at things, I see very little cohesion as to like, okay, if I were to use this in a game, I'm missing X, Y, and Z. Like you've given me a main character and they've got a jump, and they've got an attack, and they've got like a walk animation, but they're missing something else. So I think that because I created something that is a sort of full scope game, it made this asset pack very complete. And that means that when I go to reuse it in future projects, I'm not missing any of those assets because it's like a little more comprehensive. And I gave myself, a variety of different environments. I've got this like castle, this purple castle theme. I've got a sort of like desert looking theme. Which you can also sort of like use the desert and the stone to make it looks like a cave interior, and then a sort of like general grassy plains. So because because there's so much variety to it, it made it very easy to kind of use it for all different odds and ends. And then like even the like here's another example. I've got the sort of like side-scrolling Zelda game. I've got this like skeletal warrior that you fight in the game, and then I reuse that in my like 2D card battle game as a enemy. So just because so many different games feature again the same aspect ratio and the same um, perspective, that being the sort of like side on 2D perspective, that's what made it very easy for me to like grab assets from different projects and reuse them here and there.
Nice. Honestly, what I think I need to do to make this the most feasible for myself is to nail down a master palette that I use. Because I talked earlier about
Mm-hmm.
palettes and how
Yep,
much
yep.
agonizing I do over them. Every game, my first thing is what's the palette? And I try to think about, okay, what kind of vibe am I trying to get in the game? What do I want things to look like, right? But I know that a lot of other indie devs who have been doing this a lot, like I follow Adam Eunice all the time, and like they'll have their own master palette that they've nailed down and they use it for every project. And
Mm-hmm.
the benefit of that is that, yeah, then if I am making all my games in the same resolution, maybe one thing is top down and maybe one thing is side view, maybe it doesn't always exactly line up, but there's a much better chance of those assets looking good together.
Mm-hmm.
Because what I've been doing so far is that when I do a jam, I create all this art that's like one-time use, and then I drop it on Open Game Art because I'm like, at least someone else can use it for something if I can't reuse it in another game. But yeah, I think it would be better if I was able to make more use of these things for sure.
Nice. I mean, I think it's very generous of you to like make your assets freely available like that. I think that you know there's maybe too much of a desire on my part to extract value from the things that I create to like list them for sale, even though it's not like they are necessarily professional quality or anything like that. So, well, it's I think like only a small handful of people have actually bought that asset pack from me, so it probably would be better served to just put it out there for free. Um, so, but in general, I think the idea that you're describing of creating that kind of master palette makes a lot of sense. And then from there, it also really comes down to like what are the genres you're making, because here we're looking at characters that are animated from that sort of like side-scrolling 2D perspective, and I can definitely see them having that capacity to be reused in another project. But on the other hand, like they're also very specific. Like it would be weird to see a Ghibli soot sprite running around in another project, whereas I think another aspect of the artwork for my projects is that I've got these very like archetypical. Hmm? What is that word? I've got like this skeleton warrior, the goblin, and it's like, okay, it's very easy for me to reuse a goblin in a different game because it doesn't have too specific of a design, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, that's very true as well. And that's why I think even with the Game Jam games I've done, I usually only bother posting the art if it is something kind of more generic. Like I did a game Portal Panic that's
Hmm.
about slingshotting farmyard animals into portals. And right, so stuff like that, like just pigs and cows, I'm like, okay, someone's gonna be able to use this like pig or cow or chicken, right?
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, stuff like this. Also with the copyright stuff around Spirited Away, I'm not going to try anything.
No, no, no,
But
but for the purpose of the game jam, at least, I think it's should be fine.
yeah. By the way, you can also upgrade your houses. If you click on them, you can make
Oh,
them bigger, and you can buy your little Soot Sprites decorations for their houses. That'll make them happy.
okay, that's super
And by
cute. No, I
happy,
did
I
not
just mean
realize that.
faster.
Get to work. Um, yeah. Okay. Wow. There's a lot of like extra complexity in terms of like. Oh, I've clicked on these guys and I didn't realize I stopped them from working. Um, I thought I'd reached the sort of like maximum capacity for. I don't know. I got 48 baths on the first time that I played through the game. I don't know if that's necessarily good or not. Not the first time I played, but the that seems to be my high score at least.
What were the high scores? Casty, are you still in the chat? Someone had like an outrageously high one.
Please.
I'm not the best at min-maxing. Yeah, Casty, what was the high score?
120. Oh my gosh. Although I can definitely see how it cascades. Like you really can get things sort of piling up once you start adding more decorations and characters. Like the more quickly they move, the more quickly everything can build up after that. So
Yeah, there you got close to the boiler exploding too.
yeah, yeah. Well, let's let that happen now. And yeah, if anyone has any last second questions to ask in chat, now would be the time to do so. And otherwise, um, yeah, do you have any specific social media channels that you'd like to plug, or anyone else? You're welcome to give a shout out as well. Oh, there we go. The explosion.
Yeah, there it goes. All right, let me drop in the chat. I'll drop a link to mine, and Casty, you should drop a link to yours.
Yes. I will always drop a link to people's like itch.io profiles, but Cool Coding Cat mentions, I like the simplicity of these tile sets. A lot of tile sets, you load them into tiled and find they're complex and hard to figure out how to put them together in a game setting that looks good because these tiles are part of a complex jigsaw puzzle. Yeah, yeah, I've definitely encountered that as well. Great. Well, Maya, thank you so much for joining me on the stream today. And if you do end up having another project down the line, whether it's Demon Chalk or something else, I'd be more than happy to talk about it and give some design feedback if you're looking for it.
Yeah, thanks so much for doing this. It's honestly like the absolute best thing about game jams is that you get to watch people play your games. Like in no other context can I actually get like more than one person who's not like my dad to play one of my games. So like yeah, getting to actually watch in real time, seeing, what makes sense, what doesn't, what seems fun, right? Like what do players linger on? All this kind of thing is super helpful. So I really appreciate you doing this.
Yeah, certainly. And thanks for coming on and talking about your experience.
Yeah, of course. Thanks.
All right, best of luck. And yeah, bye bye for now.
Bye.